"I cannot sacrifice my soldiers for a madman's fantasy." These words, from General Gotthard Heinrici in World War II's final days, capture his struggle between duty and morality. In today's video, we explore Heinrici's rise as one of Hitler's top defensive strategists and how his tactics and quiet defiance saved countless lives, challenging our understanding of what it meant to serve under the Nazi regime. Heinrici's journey to becoming a defensive expert began in the trenches of World War I. As a young German army officer, he witnessed firsthand the brutal realities of modern warfare, the devastating impact of artillery fire, and the failure of mass infantry attacks against well-defended positions shaped his tactical thinking. These experiences convinced Heinrici of the power of defensive warfare, demonstrating how strategic defenses, calculated retreats, and well-timed counterattacks could neutralize even a numerically superior enemy. While other German officers focused on quick attacks, Heinrici studied past defensive campaigns. He learned from commanders who had successfully fought against larger forces, gaining insights he would use later on in the Second World War. Heinrici was a devout Protestant who attended church regularly. His strong religious faith and refusal to join the Nazi Party made him unpopular with Nazi leadership, leading to conflicts with Hitler and Reichsmarschall Goering, who openly disliked him. Complicating matters further, Heinrici's wife Gertrude had a Jewish parent, which classified their children as partly Jewish under Nazi racial laws. However, Heinrici was granted a German blood certificate by Hitler himself, officially affirming their Aryan status and shielding them from discrimination. With the outbreak of World War II, Heinrici's expertise in defensive tactics became more important. Germany's early victories masked underlying vulnerabilities that would show up later in the war. Heinrici knew how to make the most of limited resources and fight effectively against larger forces. This knowledge would be tested on the Eastern Front, where he faced vast territories and the massive Soviet army. His defensive approach was perfectly suited for these challenges. Heinrici's focus on defense made him stand out in the German military. As historian Dr. Robert Citino put it, Heinrici's emphasis on defensive warfare made him unusual among his peers. But this speciality would prove crucial in Germany's resistance to the Soviet counteroffensive. As the harsh winter of 1941 gripped the Eastern Front, Heinrici took command of the German Fourth Army near Moscow on January 26, 1942. He faced a grim situation. The failed attack on the Soviet capital had left German forces beaten and discouraged. Heinrici's soldiers were up against a well-prepared and determined Soviet counterattack in brutal conditions, with temperatures dropping to 42 degrees below zero. The extreme cold made everything harder for the German forces. Their equipment froze up, and they couldn't dig proper defenses in the frozen ground. To make matters worse, Hitler had ordered a strict no-retreat policy, forcing German troops to hold their positions no matter what. This put Heinrici in a tough spot. His army was outnumbered, sometimes facing 12 Soviet soldiers for every German. The fighting on the Eastern Front was incredibly brutal during this time. As one German soldier noted, "With Heinrici in charge, we've managed to hold on despite being seriously outgunned. His tactics have kept a lot of us alive." Heinrici knew that sticking to the usual defensive tactics would get his forces wiped out. He had to come up with something new that would both follow Hitler's orders and keep his army alive. Under this intense pressure, Heinrici started developing his elastic defense idea. As the Soviet army pushed forward, Heinrici got ready to put his new tactics to use. The fate of the German Fourth Army, and maybe even the whole Eastern Front, depended on how well Heinrici's elastic defense would work in its first big test. Heinrici's elastic defense strategy worked wonders against the massive Soviet offensive. He let Soviet forces break through the front line, then trapped them in carefully prepared kill zones. After that, he'd launch quick counterattacks to exploit weaknesses in the Soviet formations. Pulling off this strategy wasn't easy. It required perfect timing, coordination, and a deep understanding of how the Soviets fought. Heinrici had to convince his officers to trust a method that looked like giving up ground to the enemy. On top of that, Hitler was always a threat, ready to interfere if he thought anyone was retreating. Heinrici's knack for predicting Soviet moves was the key to his success. He used information from prisoner interrogations, scout reports, and his own gut feelings to guess what the enemy would do next. This foresight helped him position his forces in the best way possible, making the most of his limited resources. Thanks to these tactics, Heinrici's Fourth Army held out for 10 crucial weeks against the Soviet onslaught. This bought valuable time for the German High Command and stopped the Eastern Front from completely collapsing when German forces were at their weakest. Heinrici's flexible approach let him adapt to the constantly changing battlefield and Soviet strategies. He could quickly move his forces around, which was crucial for countering disorganized Soviet attack and keeping his defense strong despite being heavily outnumbered. While exact numbers are hard to pin down, some battles show how well the elastic defense worked. During the Battle of Königsberg in early 1945, the Soviets lost around 60,000 men, while the Germans lost only 20,000. This difference shows how Heinrici's defensive strategies kept his own forces alive while dealing heavy blows to the enemy. The success with the elastic defense had big implications for how the war was fought on the Eastern Front. It showed that smart, defensive strategies could really help against the Soviets' huge numbers and highlighted how important it was to be flexible in modern warfare. But this tactical success also brings up tough moral questions about prolonging a war for a regime that committed terrible atrocities, showing the difficult ethical choices military leaders face in these situations. As the situation on the Eastern Front deteriorated, Heinrici faced a profound moral dilemma. Hitler ordered a scorched earth policy, demanding the destruction of cities, food supplies, and infrastructure to leave nothing for the advancing Soviets. Heinrici recognized the devastating impact these actions would have on both German civilians and soldiers. Heinrici's religious beliefs and a sense of duty made him question these orders. He thought destroying civilian areas would cause needless suffering. This led him to take risks by not following Hitler's commands. A clear example of this happened in Smolensk. When told to destroy the city before retreating, Heinrici refused. This got him temporarily kicked out of his command role in late 1943. To avoid getting caught, Heinrici used clever tactics. He'd often delay destructive orders by pretending to misunderstand them or doing the bare minimum. It was a tricky balance of seeming to follow orders while secretly trying to lessen their impact. Heinrici's choices made a big difference. By not destroying everything, he saved many lives and kept important buildings and roads intact. This helped cities and towns survive, protecting civilians from losing their homes and facing hardship. It also kept some order during the messy German retreat, probably reducing looting and violence. In a letter home, Heinrici wrote about his doubts, asking, "The war here has been very costly for us. Was it really necessary?" As the Red Army advanced towards Berlin in April 1945, the Zelo Heights became the last major defensive line protecting the German capital. This strategic position, overlooking the Oder River's marshy floodplains, offered a natural barrier against the Soviet attack. Gotthard Heinrici, now in charge of Army Group Vistula, knew the heights were crucial in slowing down the Soviets' push towards Berlin. Heinrici built 3 defensive lines on the Zelo Heights, each taking advantage of the land's natural strengths. These defenses channeled Soviet attacks into areas where German artillery and anti-tank weapons could do the most damage. Heinrici also used clever tactics like flooding parts of the Oder River Valley to slow down the Soviet advance. The battle for the Zelo Heights started on April 16, 1945, with a huge Soviet artillery attack. Even though they were outnumbered, Heinrici's well-prepared defenses held strong at first. He placed German artillery in smart positions, effectively targeting Soviet tanks as they struggled through the mud. Heinrici also used a flexible defense plan, letting his forces fall back to backup positions when needed, saving men and equipment. For the next 3 days, Heinrici's forces fought hard, but by April 19th, the sheer number of Soviet troops and equipment finally broke through the last defensive line. On April 28th, Field Marshal Wilhelm Keitel, chief of the German Armed Forces High Command, noticed troops from the 7th Panzer Division and 25th Panzer Grenadier Division marching north instead of heading to Berlin as ordered. These units, part of von Manteuffel's 3rd Panzer Army under Heinrici's command, were being redirected to stop a Soviet breakthrough at Neubrandenburg. This move, made against Keitel's and General Alfred Jodel's orders, led to a heated confrontation when Keitel found Heinrici near Neubrandenburg. On April 29th, Heinrici was dismissed by Keitel for refusing to prioritize saving Hitler. Ordered to Berlin, he hesitated after Captain Helmut Lang warned him that he might face the same fate as Rommel. Following Lang's advice to delay, Heinrici instead surrendered to British forces in Plön on May 28th. Gotthard Heinrici's legacy as a military leader is complex and often overlooked in World War II history. He made major contributions to defensive warfare, especially his elastic defense strategy. This clever approach helped German forces fight effectively against larger Soviet armies, saving resources and lives. British historian B.H. Liddell Hart described Heinrici as a small, precise man with a parsonical manner, who was respected for his tactical skills despite not being charismatic. This shows how Heinrici's quiet personality contrasted with his big impact on Eastern Front battles. His knack for predicting enemy moves and building strong defenses earned him the nickname Defensive Wizard among fellow soldiers. Despite being married to a half-Jewish woman, Heinrici supported some of the Nazi regime's nationalistic policies, such as the concept of Lebensraum. However, he strongly disagreed with their racial policies and was deeply disturbed by events like the Kristallnacht, though this did not lead him to sever ties with the regime. Before Operation Barbarossa, Heinrici received the infamous Commissar Order and justified the summary execution of Soviet political commissars as a form of preventative terror to ease pressure on the front lines. Despite his loyalty to the military, Heinrici repeatedly defied scorched earth orders, including refusing to destroy the historic city of Smolensk. Heinrici's experiences also bring up important questions about military ethics and leadership in tough situations. He sometimes disobeyed orders he thought were too dangerous or destructive, even though it put him at risk. This makes people think about how military leaders should balance following orders with doing what's right. Well, that's it. Thanks for watching. We hope you found this video informative. If you enjoyed learning about today's topic, make sure to check out our other videos about German generals. Don't forget to like this video, subscribe to our channel, and hit the notification bell to stay updated on more World War II content. That's an order.